Maria Espinoza, former president of UNGA. It's a pleasure having you today. Thank you for joining this session at the Raisina Middle East here in Abu Dhabi.
Well, I'm very, very pleased to be here, to be a little bit part of history, since this is the first ever Raisina Middle East dialogue and forum. I think it's good to be here, good to strengthen the relationship between India and the UAE, but to bring the international community to reflect on critical issues, on the relationship between the Middle East and the rest of the world. Being a Latin American, I cannot be more pleased.
Our pleasure, and good to have you again. Given now that there is a fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, we know that in order to achieve lasting peace in the Middle East, there should be serious talks about a two-state solution. Given that 75% of UN member states recognize Palestine as a state, can UNGA take action when countries like the US use their veto power in the Security Council?
I would say that, I don't know, I lost even track of how many resolutions have passed through the General Assembly, basically addressing this very long-standing, protracted, unresolved conflict. I think it is about time for implementation. We don't need to come up with anything revolutionary or new. That there is an important piece of international law, of mandates, of commitments from the larger majority of UN member states calling for a two-state solution, but basically calling for peace in the Middle East. We understand and we have witnessed that it's not an issue among two countries. It is a larger issue that has implications for the whole environment, peace environment in the region. And that affects development, investment, the well-being of people. It really affects the social cohesion in the need to cooperate and work together of an entire region. And I think it is about time that peace comes back, and peace that is owned not only by the countries involved, but by all parties, by the neighbors, by the countries that have been actively engaged, for example, in taking the refugees. The UN has deployed an incredible humanitarian response and support to the people in need. So I think that since we are experiencing a political transition in the United States, I think it is about time that we pull our intelligence, wisdom, and good diplomacy together. The UN continues to have, of course, a critical role. The UN General Assembly in particular, because as we all know, the General Assembly is this parliament of nations that come together to address the critical issues of our time. One of the critical issues is an unresolved conflict in the Middle East. So I think that the time has come that diplomacy deploys in full and addresses these issues, which is, as I said, one of the most, the longest, unresolved conflict in the world. And we all have a responsibility. I say that being a Latin American former diplomat, it is about everybody. It's about us pulling the intellectual resources, the diplomatic resources we have in hand. And there has been many initiatives. We know many countries that have deployed their good offices, but at a certain point, the UN has, as this, government of nations, has to also support, take the responsibility, and be part of the solution.
Can we be hopeful about that under a new Trump administration? I mean, President Trump said several times he wants peace, but at the same time, we've seen many plans, proposals, or even executive orders that state otherwise. For example, the reversal of sanctions on Israeli settlements in the West Bank, and also, quote, the clean out Gaza Strip plan. Can we be hopeful about that, and can the UN take action in this regard?
I think this goes beyond being hopeful. I think that we have the instruments in hand. Who is going to benefit from real peace, sustainable peace, durable peace in the Middle East? I think everybody is going to benefit. What I have also heard from President Trump is, yes, he wants peace. And the way you build peace is bringing all the parties together and making sure that everybody gives up something, reaches an agreement that will benefit the ones that have suffered, the core of the conflict, but the neighboring countries and everybody else. So I think that dialogue, good diplomacy, the commitments that we have already made as an international community, the many resolutions, both in the Security Council and the General Assembly, should be deployed and used in full. The world is formed by 193, almost 194 countries, and I think that we do have a shared responsibility. If we want peace, it needs to be a people-centered peace. It has to be a peace that benefits all parties in the same way, and that includes in its own by the neighbors and by the region as a whole. I continue to be optimistic. I think it is about time we deploy the resources we have and just end this conflict once and for all. But that comes with the full respect for international humanitarian law, the full respect for human rights international law, and that comes with the well-being and the dignity of all the parties involved.
What we've also heard and from President Trump so far is that he said the U.S. would exit from the Climate Paris Agreement and the World Health Organization. What would this mean for the United Nations and basically other countries as well? And what would be the impact of that?
I would say that the issue of global health, the issue of the environmental crisis that we are experiencing, it's really affecting and hurting people. Sometimes we focus on the institutions and on the legal and normative frameworks we have. We tend to do that as diplomats and when you are at the negotiation table. But we often forget, who are the humans involved in this? When you face a pandemic like the COVID-19 pandemic, I think the role of WHO is absolutely critical. I think that when you look at the fires in California, when you look at the floodings in many parts of the world, when you look at the energy crisis in a country that used to export energy, like Ecuador, my own country, because of drought, you see that we have an objective scientific problem that we need to address, because it's hurting people, it's hurting our economies, it's hurting our growth, it's hurting our future at the end of the day. And I think that this is a shared responsibility. These challenges are not challenges that you can go it alone and say, we go first because, climate change and the impacts of climate change do not respect borders. Nature does not work, does not understand what a national border is. It's a, bigger planetary crisis that is being proven by science many times. And time and again, we know that we are not doing enough. This country has hosted a very successful COP28. I had the privilege to serve in its advisory committee. It really showed that when the world comes together, incredible things can happen. The agreement that we reached during COP28 and later in COP29 are, you keep your hope in a way. Perhaps not good enough, not with the necessary ambition. What I'm trying to say here is that there is an international community. I think we have to respect the sovereign decisions of countries that say, I'm not going to participate or subscribe on this particular agreement or commitment. But I think that the world has to continue and continue in a way where, the multilateral institutions are trusted. But even if I say that, what I'm also saying is that the United Nations, the system, the multilateral architecture needs a profound retooling, needs to be rejuvenated, needs to be reformed. Perhaps this is also a wake-up call to say we really need to be serious about making these institutions more relevant, more efficient, more transparent. All this is needed, and it's needed urgently. And it's normal that after 80 years of history, the UN needs to be rejuvenated, needs to be modernized. And since I've been part, either as ambassador or as president of the General Assembly, the key word, the magic word is reform. Mm-hmm. The organization is constantly under reform. Reform of the Security Council, reform of the peace and security architecture, reform of the development pillar of the organization. And this is almost 30 years ago. But I think it is time to come to grips and say, what are the real transformations that the organization needs? And we have a blueprint. It's called the Pact of the Future that was adopted last year in September by heads of state and government. There are very interesting components to the Pact of the Future, providing guidance, establishing specific mandates on what and how these institutions within the big system of the United Nations need to change. And perhaps this is helping to take that seriously and to commit to revamp multilateralism and to modernize and profoundly reform the United Nations. It has to deliver, it has to be relevant, it has to be one step ahead. That's why, we created these organizations almost 80 years ago.
Thank you so much. It was good to have you today. Thank you for joining this panel again.
Thank you.